Hello everybody, welcome back. I'm the Strategy Professor, and today we're going to be talking about the 824 Jungle Patch. You can find access to this Google Doc in the description. I'll have timestamps there as well if you're interested. I also have a link to my other tier lists that I've done on this patch, so be sure to check out the support tier list, the AD carry tier list, and the mid tier list as well. Got that linked in the Google Doc. As always, this is aimed towards a plat minus audience, so you might see a different kind of meta if you're looking at pro play or challenger level play, or even if you're playing in iron or bronze. It might be a little bit different, but I think it'll still be useful for everybody. And I focus mostly on people who have a reasonable amount of games on the champion, so not one-tricks, not first-timers. And then I look forward towards the meta and not necessarily just at statistics. Some of the champions near the top won't have the best statistical rankings, but they are undeniably extremely strong right now with a proper amount of practice. So we also have a little mini guide for each one of these champions. So we've got... on here, a link to the Wikia. We've got recommended runes, recommended items. Keep in mind, this might change depending on the champion, depending on the game state, but this is a good place to start thinking about it. And then I have a rating system, 1 to 5, for 5 different tasks that the jungler can do as well. So clearing is how fast can the jungler clear, and how safe are they when they're clearing in terms of how much damage are they taking, how well can they respond if they get invaded. Dueling is how well does the jungler do one-on-one against the other jungler, particularly early on in the game. Ganking, how well does the jungler gank? Are they likely to be able to get a kill during the laning phase of the game? Scaling, how well does the champion perform over time? And then finally, reliability is how likely is it that someone can play this champion consistently over many games, right? So several things go into this, such as how hard is the champion mechanically to play? How difficult are the decisions on the champion? And then also, how likely is it that the enemy team can counter the champion? So are there good picks out there against this champion? And does this champion work well with things that your team might be likely to pick? Okay, so let's go ahead and get in here. And remember, as always, if you enjoy the content, be sure to like and subscribe. Hit that bell button. It does help other people find the content on the channel. You know, and that's just great. If you really want to support good, in-depth insights into tier lists and not just a really quick, you know, top 10 video that's 5 minutes long, right? Like, unfortunately, a lot of other videos out there like that. So let's go ahead and get in here. Now, I will add the disclaimer also that I am a support main. Jungle is one of my least played roles, but I did heavily research this. Obviously, I have junglers in my games all the time, so I can get a sense for what feels really strong. But as far as, like, optimal pathing and some, like, very nuanced stuff like that, I may not be the most knowledgeable in the world, but I think I know enough to, you know, drop down a pretty good tier list here. Okay, so first up, I think number 1 is Kha'zix. This champion is just ridiculous right now. He's had a bit of a revival lately. Now, he was very good with Dark Harvest, but I still think that he's good with Electrocute as well. The main difference is if you want to take Dark Harvest, you need to be thinking about resets in skirmishes versus Electrocute is going to give you a lot more upfront damage and burst. Particularly early on in the game, if you expect to be dueling the enemy jungler a lot, I would definitely go with Electrocute over Dark Harvest. But if you think that you're going to be getting lots of resets later on, they have a lot of squishies on their team, you suspect you might be skirmishing or team fighting later on in the game, then Dark Harvest might be a pick for you. But the main thing about Kha'zix right now is that he's so good at dueling other enemy junglers, and dueling matters so much because scuttles are so important early on. That you'll often find yourself having to face off with the enemy jungler for that very important resource. And he's just one of the best because you get lots of good isolation damage, and they did buff his isolation damage fairly recently. A lot of people forget that. I guess this wasn't the ISO, but it's the unseen threat. So if you come out of a bush at somebody when you're dueling them, now you're getting 40% of your bonus AD instead of just 20%. And they changed the slow to be 60% early on, and then 90% if you evolve it. I don't think people evolve this that early. I think that most people probably evolve their Q first, and then I would imagine either their jump or their ultimate next. It probably depends on the matchup. But either way, this is very, very significant. That's a lot more slow for just 1 point in this ability. Early on, it's going to allow you to run people down, and this is a lot more sneak attack damage if you get the jump on someone out of the bush, or if you're using your ultimate to get resets in fight. So that was a really big buff that got kind of overshadowed near the end of last season because of the meta and how it was shaken out. But now that dueling matters so much in the jungle and dragons matter so much right now, he's excellent at taking dragons because they're obviously going to be isolated, and then that means your Q is going to do a lot of extra damage, and particularly once you evolve it, it does just a tremendous amount of damage. So you can take dragons really quickly, you can take barons quickly, and he has very unique gank paths, especially once he gets to level 6. Being able to jump over walls while you're invisible and then make plays on people is tremendous. Like, it's very, very difficult to deal with that. So he scales really well. He duels well early. He takes objectives very well. And he scales extremely hard. It's 130% bonus AD ratio that gets an extra 45% damage, or 45%, I guess, if the cooldown is reduced. But it's just an insane amount of damage this guy puts out. And he can also get resets in fight off of his leap. So he's really, really good. He's one of the best snowballing assassin type of junglers. It's very difficult to deal with this guy. He was a true menace early on in the season. They did nerf his ult back in like 8.11 or 8.10. But he has had a resurrection lately, and he's going to be very strong. So I would run either Dark Harvest or Electrocute. I'm going to go ahead and put Electrocute because I think that's better, and it's a little bit less reliant on the snowball early on. And then just maximum damage, sudden impact, Ravenous Hunter, Triumph, Coup de Grace. And then you're just going to go Warrior, Dustblade, Ghostblade. So very, very strong champion, great duelist, great scaling, great utility with his invisibility, great resets. He's just a beast right now, and he has a really high win rate as well for a jungler. He's like 52%. Let me pull this up. Now, win percentages don't mean everything, but they do mean something. So he'll be one that is an assassin and nevertheless has a really high win rate. Usually assassins don't have a great win rate because people play them and they don't know what they're doing all the times, and they can get punished really hard if you fall behind in the game. But because of that invisibility, he has some great comeback mechanics. He can always get a couple of picks later on, even if he's behind. He's still going to be able to one-shot squishies, if he comes at him out of a bush. So I think that gives him an edge over some of the other assassins that are out there. Okay, Camille. Now, Camille could arguably be number one. I think that she has the most utility and just the most raw, like, versatility and power of most of these junglers. A lot of these are good at, like, very specific things, but she seems to be kind of good at almost everything. Her major deal is she's very difficult from what I hear. I've never tried to jungle with her, but from what I've heard, it can be very difficult to jungle with her if you don't path correctly and if you don't kite the mobs. So I've heard that jungling can be a bit of a beast with her, so her clearing, I'm going to go ahead and say it's just a 1, because I think that's what I've heard, is that it's very hard and it takes some getting used to. But if you can get through her clearing, I imagine she's probably pretty good against single targets, as long as you're getting resets, on your Q. She has some of the best dueling out there. If she hits somebody with that hook shot, procs, gets that extra physical shield, and then just starts to go to work on you, gets those Q resets for the true damage. She can beat almost anybody up, especially if she gets the jump on them. And it's highly likely she's going to get the jump on them, because that hook shot allows you to, get people that you don't see, but it also allows you to reset. So if you're in kind of an awkward position, if someone's running at you, then you can kind of reset the fight to an extent and jump back on them. Or you can just run away. That's another thing, is that if they're ahead or you're just afraid they're going to be able to beat you, Kha'Zix gets the jump on you or something like that, then you can actually get away with your E quite a lot. So it's very versatile in that sense. She's also someone later on where she can become a split pusher if she needs to. Now, sometimes it's awkward if you try to split push. If you're the jungler with Smite, then your team's not going to be able to contest objectives as much. But that is an option that's on the table. She can actually go out there and beat a lot of solo laners on the split, because she scales extremely well. Her ganks are also legendary. They're so good. She can come from really weird angles, kind of like Kha'Zix, but she has a lot more range with her hook shot, and her ultimate allows you to hold people still. If you show up to a lane and you ult on top of somebody, with the exception of a couple of special champions, like Sivir can block her ult with Spell Shield. Some champions can Zonya's her ult. Like Tristana can blow her out of the ult to break the ring. Like, there are a couple of champions that can deal with her. But by and large, they're going to be dead, because they're going to be held down for however long, 2.5 to 4 seconds, and your team's going to be able to kill them. So she has some of the best ganking in the game. She has extreme mobility with hook shot. She can split push. She can rotate really quickly. She can duel people. Team fight's a little bit sketchier, but she's great at cleanup duty. She's great at flanking. She can get to that back line and tear them up. She has excellent itemization. She becomes not only a heavy damage threat, but also kind of a tanky threat as the game goes on. Once you get a Titanic Hydra and a Sterix, into the mid and the late game, it can be very difficult to kill her, particularly because she's going to be getting this shield in addition to the Sterix shield, in addition to having, like, pretty good health off of Sterix Trinity, and just her base stats are also pretty decent as well. So is a very, very strong champion right now. So I think that that she's definitely someone to consider moving forward. They did nerf her attack speed a little bit on the last patch, so they're aware that she's very good in the jungle. But I still think she can work around that attack speed nerf. Because a lot of her damage are her abilities too. Like, she does need attack speed, but she has lots of auto attack resets to help her out with her Q. So I think she'll still be okay. So definitely has a learning curve. Her clearing's not great, but her dueling's fantastic. Ganking's fantastic. Scaling is some of the best of anybody because it's so versatile. Not only, like I said, can she duel, she can split, she can flank on the back line. She takes objectives pretty well, not quite as well as something like a Kha'zix, but that true damage definitely adds up on her Q against things like Baron and Dragon. So extremely strong champion. You're going to want to run Press the Attack, Triumph, Alacrity, Coup de Grace, Sudden Impact, and Relentless Hunter. The fact that Dark Harvest got nerfed is actually extremely good for her because she didn't want to run that rune anyways. So that's going to improve her matchups against things like Kha'zix and against things like Graves early on because her rune is not very likely to get nerfed anytime soon. And it's extremely good on her. So you're just going to want to go Tabby, and then you're going to get a Tiamat early. You're just going to stay at Tiamat, and then you're going to go Warrior and Trinity. That's going to help you a lot with your clear. Then after you get Warrior and Trinity, you can always turn it into a Titanic Hydra later on. Very strong. Now, I think they might nerf Tiamat on the next patch. We'll see, but we'll revisit her, and I'll talk about it on the next tier list. But right now, very strong, just good all around. Very far above average in most categories. Okay, Graves is another one that I haven't really been seeing that much, although I think his play rate is fairly high. Now, Camille's win rate, once again, just to kind of put a cherry on top of that last conversation, is fairly low. I think it's like 49%, something like that, even though she is super strong. Where is she? Am I just like blind? Yeah, she's like at 48%, but I think, like I said, it's just because she has a big learning curve, and people see pros play her, and they try to first-time her in ranked and end up getting destroyed, so I don't think that reflects too much on exactly how strong she is. Now, Graves is another one. I'm not sure where Graves is. He's about 50%. He's got a decent play rate here. The higher the elo goes, the more likely people are to play Graves. I guess he's the 4th most played, and Camille is the 5th most played. But he still does a ton of damage. I mean, I think a lot of people are sleeping on this dude. He's very, very strong right now. He can definitely one-shot people. He has very nice wave clear, or I guess jungle clear. Because of his knockback mechanic and his AoE, he takes virtually no damage in the jungle, especially if you take fleet footwork. So he can power farm really quickly. He can duel other people in the jungle, especially if they're close to walls, and he's able to get that explosion off of his Q for the bonus damage on the return. He scales extremely well as the game goes on. Later on, he's ranged, and he can one-shot people, and he becomes kind of a semi-tank with his true grit to get that bonus armor. You know, you can get up to a maximum of 120 armor, which is just stupid. So he's very, very good against other AD champions. Has a fairly low cooldown ult with a pretty long range. So it's like 1800 range. So he can pick people off. He can assassinate. He's pretty good in team fights just because, you know, he does do some of that AoE damage. He's very good with Stormrazor because whenever he gets a crit, it shoots 6 pellets, a 50% wider cone, and deals a lot of extra bonus damage. You can read all the math here, but when he crits people, it hurts really badly. So he's just a tremendous champion right now. Also, Black Cleaver has a special interaction with him. So that means that if you hit somebody in their face with Black Cleaver and you hit them with 4 pellets, it's going to apply 4 Black Cleaver stacks because it's an exception on him. That's why Black Cleaver is just insane, because you basically get like instant stacks on, like instantly full stacks on like 2 auto attacks. If you get 1 crit and it hits 6 pellets, you get a full Black Cleaver stack immediately on 1 shot if you have Stormrazor. So that interaction is really overpowered, honestly. And so, you know, you just want to go Tabby, and then, or you can get, you know, Berserker Greaves if you want to. It's up to you. Most high-end players will get Tabby. Helps you clear. Helps you tank Baron if you need to. You know, attack speed is nice, but realistically, he's a caster. You know, it's his abilities that are going to do a lot of damage. He's going to hit them once with Stormrazor, Q, ult, and they're dead. So, then Warrior, Stormrazor, Black Cleaver. This fantastic interactions with him. And then you just want to go Fleet Footwork, Triumph, Alacrity, Coup de Grace, Absolute Focus, and Water Walking. You can do something like Electrocute if you want to, but the vast majority of people are going to take Fleet Footwork. It gives you that speed to run people down, and it helps keep you even more healthy in the jungle. So His clearing is a 5. He's some of the best in the game at clearing. His dueling is a 4. It's very good. You know, some champions like Kha'zix, if they get him isolated in the jungle, they can probably kill him. But overall, he's very strong. His ganking is okay. It's not phenomenal. He's mostly a power farm jungler. If you're ganking a lane that has crowd control, though, he can put up the damage to clean people up. And his ultimate does have nice range for those rundown kills. So that is very nice. And Smokescreen is extremely annoying against ranged champions in particular. So he has some tools, but he doesn't have a lot of mobility, and he doesn't have any CC outside of Smokescreen. So his ganks are all right. His scaling is through the roof. If this guy gets some gold, he's going to run over almost anybody in a game. And his reliability is pretty high. You can learn him fairly easily. He has a very kind jungle clear, as I keep saying. But that's really the main thing about him. And his skill shots are limited, right? You just have to be able to hit your ult pretty much. So fairly easy champion to play compared to something like a Camille. So very effective, strong champ. Definitely consider giving him a whirl. Jax is another one. Now, Jax falls off pretty hard at higher elos, but I think he's still a monster at like gold and silver, where people will leave you alone and just let you farm for a little while. So that's one of the shortcomings of Jax, is we're kind of in a meta that's heavily defined by the early game and really getting ahead and abusing people. Particularly if you're trying to climb an elo, you need to be gaining massive advantages. But Jax does make up for that with his scaling. Like, he can fight people early on. He's just not going to be as good at it as someone like a Camille or a Kha'Zix or a Xin Zhao. He can get busted up by those champions. But especially if he gets a little bit ahead, gets a couple of levels underneath him, then he can certainly do well. I think, you know, he's very good at taking dragons and barons later on if he gets a couple of items. So that's really good. They did nerf his scaling on this patch on his ult, so it does a little bit less damage up at level 16. But you're already going to be insanely strong at that level, and a lot of times you overkill people anyways. So he's pretty legit. If your flash is up, you're a really good threat on ganks, because you can jump onto people, flash, jump, stun, and if you land that stun, they're pretty much dead most of the time. And he's very good at dueling other auto-attack reliant champions, particularly after he gets Trinity Force. So he's going to be a pretty good pick against something like a Master Yi. He's going to be a pretty good pick against, you know, like Graves, Camille, Kha'Zix, a lot of those champs. He's going to have a lot of game against them. So he does take some time to come online. He can potentially get a free pass in the jungle, though, whereas in the lane it can be tough for him. I'm not super familiar with his jungle clear time. I think he's okay. I think he's sort of, you know, somewhere in the middle as far as clearing goes. Not super fast, but not super slow. Probably takes a little bit of damage in there. So he's just kind of like all right, you know, at a lot of stuff early on. But then as the game progresses, he's going to be one of the highest scaling champions, right up there with Camille in terms of overall raw power. And he can also split push like she can. He can split push. He can duel. He has some limited team fight capabilities if you're able to flash onto the back line and get a big stun. That can be helpful. Now, it seems like he would be really easy to play just because you auto-attack a lot, but there's a big difference between a competent Jax and an incompetent Jax, and what a lot of it comes down to is how well do you use your auto-attack resets. So, you know, are you able to weave in, you know, an auto-attack and then use your Empower, and then an auto-attack, and then use your Hydra, your Titanic Hydra, right? So that's the big difference, is Jax really, really needs to get in those extra auto attacks because that procs his Grandmaster's Might even more. That stacks up his passive even more once he lands those basic attacks. So it's really, really important that you get the auto attack resets and that you get something like a Titanic Hydra fairly early and then get those resets again. So as far as build goes, most people go Tabby, Cinderhulk, Tiamat, Trinity Force, and then you finish Titanic after that. And then you can just get some tanky stuff. You know, you can get like Asterix Gauge. It's probably really common after that. So once he gets Tiamat, he can start clearing. Cinderhulk helps him with the clear as well. You can go for Stormrazor if you want that like massive burst damage, but you're already going to do high damage. So I highly recommend getting the Cinderhulk instead, just because the health combines so well with his ultimate, where he gets the extra armor and the magic resist. Having more health gives you a more effective health pool because it scales with the armor and magic resist. So I think Cinderhulk's probably the better choice, and that's what most people tend to get on him. So really good, particularly if you think you need to scale up and hard carry the game. Jax can be a good option. And he's, like I said, he's probably the tankiest option right now. So if your team doesn't have a tank you need some kind of engage. If they have a lot of assassins, then he can actually survive a lot of assassins later on into the game. Just remember, he could potentially get bulldozed early by invades off of things like Kha'Zix, Camille, Yi, Zen. So he's a risky pick. Okay, Shaco is primarily a one-trick type of champion, but I have him up here because I think he's the best one-trick champion right now. He gets very little pro play, almost no pro presence. So that means that he's not very likely to get nerfed. He's very versatile. He can get a bunch of different kinds of items. You know, he can get critical items. If they start buffing critical strike items, he can get those. He can get lethality items like Dustblade, Ghostblade. He can even get things like Trinity. So this is why last year I had him as my best one-trick jungle champion. I think I had Shaco and Master Yi. I think it was Master Yi as my best one-tricks. And I think that's still the same. You know, they did nerf him. I think they took some damage off his Q a while ago. But he's still very, very strong. And, you know, a lot of it is he's just so versatile. You know, he can duel people early on. He's got the invisibility, kind of like Kha'Zix. He has really weird gank paths. He can really exploit gaps in the vision from the enemy. He makes people live in terror early on because you just don't know if he's going to show up or not a lot of times. If you see that poof of smoke, it's probably too late. He can take dragons really quickly, kind of like Kha'Zix can as well with his clone. He can take towers really quickly with his clone. He does scale pretty well. He has nice, well, not like super insane ratios, but okay ratios on his Deceive and his 2-Shiv Poison. You know, there are so many tricks you can do with this clone. You can fake people out. You can scout with it. Like I said, you can use it for barons, dragons, towers. But you have to really know what you're doing in order to sell this clone to people in fights, to get people to try to fight the clone instead of to fight you. Now, they did recently buff it to where they buffed clones by whenever he has Ignite on him, if you clone, the clone will also have Ignite on it. So they've made it now to where anything that clones like LeBlanc or Shaco got a huge buff in terms of, you know, fairly moderate to high-end play because people, it'll be a lot harder to spot the clone. So if you have buffs or you have Ignite on you or whatever now, your clone will get that as well. So it makes it more difficult. He also has really good sneak attacks with the Jack-in-the-Box. I mean, I've seen Shaco's completely shut out the enemy jungle. Like, if they get a kill or two early and they just go sit in the enemy jungle and start setting up boxes in the right place and predict their pathing, they could just feast on that jungler. And, you know, he can get away. When he invades and kills somebody with a box, a lot of times he can just run around and use his Q to jump over walls. So he's extremely frustrating to try to track down. And he can be very, very aggressive early game, but he also scales pretty well late game. And he can play the split push game. He can play the assassination game. He takes objectives quickly. He's just difficult to play. Like, you have to know what you're doing and use all of his tools. But the tools are definitely there. So I think his clear is really good. I mean, it might even be a 5 early on. I know back in the day, Shaco, I've seen a Shaco take 2 buffs at once. You know, he had his bot lane leash blue buff. And he put like 2 or 3 boxes there. And then he went to red buff. And he put a couple of boxes there. He had bot lane, you know, do some damage to help out. And then the box cleared the blue buff. And then he cleared the red buff. And he was up at level 1. He was level 3. And he went and ganked the top lane when they were still level 1 with his double buffs. Now, I think they nerfed some of that. It's been a while since I've seen that. So I think they nerfed the timing on his boxes a while ago. I don't remember when that was. Might have been years ago for all I know. But I think his boxes used to last longer. Anyways, it doesn't matter. He's still really, really strong. So I would still go Dark Harvest on him. You can go Electrocute if you want to. It's okay. It will give you more burst. Dark Harvest does give you... it doesn't require you to get 3 hits on somebody, and you can get resets in fights. Sudden Impact, Eyeball Collection, Relentless Hunter, and then Absolute Focus and Water Walking. Pretty standard runes. And then his Tabby, Tiamat, and then I think people are going Dustblade and Trinity just so you get the maximum, like, first hit bonus. I haven't ever seen anyone get something like a Stormrazor, although that'd be interesting on him to have a bigger first upfront hit. I think he does have some kind of interaction with crit in his kit. Yeah, it can, Deceive can critically strike for 130%. Can Deceive critically strike? I don't know. Anyways, nobody gets Storm Razor, so don't worry about that. But like Trinity is something that people do get. I think it's because that extra movement speed helps you out a lot. And he can use all of those stats. He does have some AP ratios on his abilities, as you can see. But anyways, okay. So Shaco going to be really strong. If you want to put some time into him, I think he's definitely worth investing because it's highly unlikely that he's going to get a nerf, and he almost always has like a 54% win rate. Now, part of that is because only people that play Shaco are going to play Shaco, right? It's only one tricks that play him. Although, I mean, almost a 6% play rate is pretty good representation. He's the number, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So he's the 11th most played champion, so it's not like no one ever plays him. So I think he's the highest, well, Udyr's the highest win rate, but I don't think Udyr's, I don't think he's that viable right now. He's just so easy to counter with a lot of other stuff going on. It's a lot of one-tricks playing Udyr as well. But Shaco is someone that's definitely almost always has a high win rate, so if you're looking to one-trick something, definitely consider Shaco. He very rarely gets banned also. Okay, going down to number 2. I have Xin Zhao at number 2. It's totally possible you could put Zen up here instead of Jax. If it was Diamond or higher, Zen would definitely be up there instead of Jax. I just wanted to pay a little bit of respect to Jax just because he does have a high win rate. He's got the 53.4% win rate. And I feel like he's just more versatile later on in the game. But Xin Zhao is the premier early game bully. I mean, he does a ton of damage early on. It is almost impossible to duel him. I'm pretty sure he's the best duelist in the game at like level 2 and level 3. So you're definitely going to get your scuttle early on in the game. You do not want to fight this guy. If you see a Zen early on and you don't have backup, you need to turn around and run away. He is very, very strong. He gets a lot of extra bonus AD when he attacks. His abilities have a lot of base damage on him. His problem is, like, as the game goes on, he's pretty easy to kite. He only has one gap closer with his Audacious Charge, and you can peel him off after that fairly easily. They did give him a bit more utility with his Crescent Guard, which basically makes him immune to ranged attacks for quite a while, up to 6 seconds, I think. So that's really nice. Later on, you can dive that back line and just drop this, and you can cause a lot of disruption. So that's pretty cool. So there is counterplay to him, but he's such a tremendous bully early on. You can just go invade their jungle and just beat him up. So but just be careful that your lanes have priority. If they collapse on you, he is not good if he falls behind or in skirmishes where he's outnumbered. So if you try to go invade the enemy at their raptors and their mid laner shows up first, you're going to be in big trouble. So he's a very, very good duelist. He wants that one-on-one. He wants to be able to challenge people. And he excels at that early game. But if you don't get ahead early or you start getting into team 5v5s against teams that have a lot of CC, the enemy team has a Nami or a Zyra or, their 80 carries like a Lucian with Blade of the Ruined King or an Ezreal or just somebody who can evade him, it can get pretty rough. So his clearing is very good. His dueling's good. His ganking's pretty good early on. If he flash E's onto somebody, it's going to be difficult for them to get away through that slow. And he's pretty reliable. He doesn't have any skill shots, so he's fairly easy to play. I think a lot of people are going Phase Rush so that you can run people down, then Nullifying Orb, Absolute Focus, Water Walking, Triumph, and Alacrity, and then just Warrior, Trinity, Sterix. So pretty good all-in champion. I just think that something like, Kha'Zix or Graves can also be really huge bullies early on, and I just think they have a bit more utility as the game goes on. And they have more of a contingency plan. If stuff starts going wrong, I think they have ways to get back into the game later on that are a little bit better than Zen. Okay, Lee Sin is the perennial super popular champion. I think he actually is pretty good right now. They gave him some buffs. I think near the end of last season. Everybody's very familiar with Lee, I'm sure. He's a very high skill cap champ. People love to play him. But they did give him some more damage. When was this? 815. So what? They gave him a higher AD ratio on his Sonic Wave, but they nerfed the base damage on the Q, and then they put it on Resonating Strike. Base damage, let's see, reduced. Bonus AD ratio increased. Okay, so they took off % of targets missing health, and now they gave it up to a lot of extra. So I think that's a buff, pretty much. It's extra damage against a lot of people. And then they gave him a buff here. So they've been giving him some buffs near the end of the last season because, you know, they want Lee Sin in the meta. He's extremely popular. He has lots of skins, all that kind of stuff. And I think he's pretty decent right now. He does fall off later if you don't get ahead early, but he has lots and lots of utility, right? So he has a ton of mobility. You know, you can ward hop to people. You can kick them to displace them. You can execute people with the kick. You can use that Q to get onto people. So I think he's one of those balanced champions in League of Legends. Where there's plenty of counterplay to what he's doing. You see the Q, you know if he's going to go in. You have that little cat and mouse game. Are you going to use your mobility spell to try to get away? Is he going to go in? Is he not going to go in? You know, the kick can matter a lot. Like a perfect kick can completely clean up a team fight. A bad kick can save somebody. So, just a great champion. Lots of utility. Tons of damage early on. If you land that Q, you can duel most other people, even things like a Kha'Zix. Maybe even things like a Zen. If you get the drop on him with the Q, you might be able to fight him early on. So it's a lot of it's going to come down to just who gets the first hit, who gets the first move. And because he has lots of mobility, you know, he's going to be in a good spot. It did hurt that they took out Tracker's Knife, so he doesn't get a lot of those free wards like he used to. And they have increased the warded timing on the yellow wards, which affects Lee more so than other people because he doesn't want to switch over to Sweeper. But overall, still going to be a good champ. Pretty good clearing. He's pretty healthy. Pretty well-rounded. His dueling is good. His ganking is fantastic early on because he can jump over walls and come at people from weird angles, kind of like Shaco, kind of like Kha'Zix. But he also has other utility in his kit. Like, if you get behind somebody and you kick them, they're dead, like 100%, you know, on a gank most of the time. So he does have that little ability on them that it's very difficult to flash away from him. And then most people are running Electrocute now. Some people were running Dark Harvest, but I would prefer just having the upfront burst of Electrocute, make sure that someone dies. And then you get Sudden Impact, Eyeball Collection, Relentless Hunter, Triumph, and Coup de Grace. And then just Tabby, Tiamat to help you with that early clear, and then just Warrior Enchant and Black Cleaver for that utility in the mid game. So Lee Sin, very good pick. He does fall off later on if you don't get really far ahead. He doesn't have the same level of just raw, like, take over the game power as Camille, Graves, and Jax unless he's super far ahead. But he has a good chance to get super far ahead if you're good on him early because he has some of the best gank potential pre-6 of anybody. So that's really handy. So I do think that, like, probably these 6 right here are where I would stay most of the time if you're blind pick, especially if you're not trying to counter something specific. Lee, if you're good on him, can be pretty good as well. But that is where I would definitely draw a huge line. And then below that are just kind of some boutique picks, some stuff that you can pick in some situations. But I think that particularly this crew right here, the Graves, Kha'Zix, and Camille, you should definitely consider these if you like them at all. I think they're very strong. Kayn is another one who's becoming very popular. He can be good. His early game sucks. And I think it is an early game meta that's problematic, right? Because before he transforms, he's not that great. You know, he doesn't really have any CC. He can use his Blade's Reach to slow people a little bit. But you really have to have red form in order to knock people up. So if you get ahead, and you should almost always go red form on Kayn. It just gives you a lot of extra sustain. The itemization that he can get with that makes him very difficult to kill. You serve as sort of a semi-tank. You're still going to do a ton of damage, and you have that 1-second knock-up, which is a huge, huge deal. So I would say, you know, 90% of the time, you want to be getting red Kayn. And, yeah, I mean, he's pretty good. He has nice ganks. So I know I just said his ganks aren't that great because he doesn't have CC. But he can come at people through walls and put up some decent damage. So if your lane has good CC, if it's a Leona or a Nami or something like that, and it can hold people still while you do damage to him, he can be very strong while he's trying to build up. He does have pretty good wave clear. He can take Raptors in red early. So that's really nice. A lot of champions have a hard time with Raptors early on in the game. So he's okay. You're just potentially going to get dumpstered by some of those top picks if they come and invade your jungle and want to fight you. But you can run away from them, you know, with your spectral form. But just be aware, you're going to have to be tracking the enemy jungler and probably trying to avoid them. early on if you want to play Kayn, which can be, you know, more difficult than just playing something like Xin Zhao, which is like basically see somebody go kill them, you know, early on. So he's all right. I think a lot of people go Dark Harvest on him, Sudden Impact, Eyeball Collection, Relentless Hunter, Triumph, Coup de Grace, and then just Tabby, Warrior, Black Cleaver, Sterix, so kind of like the bruisery fighter tank build. And then, of course, you want to go Red Kayn. So he's all right. Good utility, really good sustain later on in the game. Like, pretty good team fighting. He's just a real pest, so he can assassinate, but he can also cause a lot of disruption on the backline. So he does have a couple of different modes, although he will get 1v1 and wrecked pretty hard if he runs into something like a Camille or a Jax later on in the game. Okay, Rammus is another one that I didn't really understand. I saw a lot of Rammus yesterday, but I think he's definitely on the upswing right now for a couple of reasons. He is a tank, but number one, he has tremendous early game ganking. He has some of the best ganking in the game. You know, he comes running up with that power ball. If you don't have flash or some kind of mobility or displacement or just something to deal with that power ball, you know, he's going to kill you a lot of the time. So the power ball is very nice. Sometimes even if you flash, he can still get on you with power ball, right? If he flashes after you and then taunts you, that can be a big deal. And so, and his power ball does decent damage. Now, you have to max power ball first because it comes down to such a lower cooldown. And then it also does pretty good damage, and the slow is a lot heavier as well. Previously, there had been some metas where you would want to max your stun, but these days, you want to be maxing that power ball because you get a lot of extra utility out of that. You also can't use this taunt against taunts. You might be able to use it against monsters. I didn't think you used to be able to use it against monsters. I'm not 100% about that though. But anyways, the main reason for this is you want to get it down to 6 seconds, and then once you get a little bit of CDR, you can get that down to like 4 or 5 seconds, and that means you can continually run people down. So he has great early game pressure. Something like defensive ball curl allows him to tank AoE camps really well, like wolves, raptors, golems. Very good against all of those. He's extremely good against melee AD champions. Obviously, that's his thing. Right, he gets a lot of extra bonus out of armor. He gets the extra damage here, and then the ball curl gives him a ton of armor. So he gets a lot of extra mileage out of armor, which is obviously going to be great against things like Kha'Zix, Camille, Graves, Xin Zhao. He's just a menace. And specifically, a couple of different things are really good about him. Number one, he takes towers really quickly. So this is something that people forget about a lot of times. He does damage to structures per second, right? And it's on a pretty low cooldown. It's 100 seconds. It used to be 60 at all levels. And then that was a meta where we saw top lane Rammus, which was pretty cool, but kind of toxic. But yeah, so basically if you can roll up and run somebody out of lane, so let's say you kill somebody on the gank, or you at least make them blow their flash and get them low, and they have to back. If you ever back and leave Rammus near a tower, he's going to chew through that tower so fast. I mean, it's 640 damage at level 6, right? And if you take Demolish, that's going to be an additional however much damage, right? Like 300-something damage to the tower. So you basically get a free plate just off of Rammus. And that gets even crazier at level 11. Now, by the time he gets to 11, all the plates are going to be gone. But he basically just dumpsters towers, like, really quickly. And remember, you can keep auto-attacking while this is going on. So this is not a channeled ability. You can just use this, and, you know, people, it's going to take towers. You can use it in team fights, too, to slow people down, and it makes it almost impossible for people to run away from him. If they've already used their flash and they don't have a lot of mobility, then he's going to be able to stick to people hardcore. So he has that utility in a team fight, but he can also take towers really well, especially with Demolish. So I think that's part of why he's coming back into the meta. It's that he is very good against a lot of the other melee AD champions, which is most champions that people play right now. He has phenomenal ganks early on, which are even more rewarding now because of tower plating. And he takes towers himself extremely fast with his passive. So that's something that I think a lot of people have been overlooking. But that certainly makes him really strong right now. So when you go Rammus, you want to go Aftershock, Demolish, Conditioning, Unflinching. Conditioning gets really strong when you have your defensive ball curl activated. And then just Triumphant Alacrity. So Alacrity is going to give you that extra little bit of attack speed. 'Cause his jungle clear is like okay, but he has a hard time against some of the larger camps like Gromp and the buffs. And then you just want to go Tabby, Cinder Hulk, and then you can kind of choose here. You know, Righteous Glory has been something that's really popular that does let you roll up on people even faster. So even if they see you on a ward, if it's a shallow ward, if it's just that little ward in the river that's like near the bottom, if they see you, it's going to be too late. You're already going to be on top of them because your Powerball is so fast, and particularly if you run Righteous Glory, that's going to make you run up even faster. So even if they flash your... after you hit them with your Q, even if they try to flash you, they're still going to be slowed for like a ton, and you're going to be able to walk up and taunt them, and then hold them still with your ult. So, very strong. And then if you want to double down, you can go Thornmail, which combines really well with your taunt and just your overall kit in general. It makes it like almost impossible to kill you with auto attacks. So I think he's just a really weird tank champion. Most tanks aren't that great right now, but just because of those traits, I think that he is actually someone that's a pretty good counter pick. You know, you just need to be careful picking him if the enemy team has a lot of peel, right? So if they have things like Nami, you know, Zyra, or just other things that can handle his ball, or if they have like an AP jungler, they have an Elise or something like that, you need to be very careful. He can itemize magic resist if he needs to. He can get something like an adaptive helm early in Mercury Treads. I've seen that happen. I mean, yeah, you're losing out on a little bit of your auto attack damage, but honestly, who cares? Like, it doesn't matter that much. Like, you're not picking Rammus to do a lot of damage. You're picking Rammus to gank people hard and to knock down towers and to peel off your AD carry with Frenzying Taunt. So, I think overall he's pretty well positioned. I think he's the best tank on the list right now, even though it seems like he's kind of like a mindless, you know, like super low elo stomp champ. He's good at that, but he's also like pretty respectable in higher ranks right now too. Maybe not in Challenger, but certainly like Diamond and Platinum. I think he's worth considering. Okay, and Master Yi is going to be the final one that I mentioned. Now, Master Yi could be up in Tier 1 right now. It's totally possible. You know, I'm sure everyone's familiar with Master Yi. You know, last stream we saw the Master Yi Taric combo in the top lane, and they even killed Master Yi like 3 times. We were up 15 kills, 2 Infernal Dragons, and 3 towers, and we had the Rift Herald. We had a Lucian bot lane. I was bot lane, and we were against a Karthus Veigar bot, and I was Nami, and we had a Lucian. We killed them like 12 times. Like, Lucian was like 12-1 coming out of the laning phase. I was like 0-1 and 15 or something going into the mid game. Our team was probably up, I don't even know. Hold on, I can pull it up here really quickly. Let me see. I want to see this gold graph, if it's going to show us. Kills and gold. Okay. How much were we up? Yeah, in this up in the mid game, we were up like 6,000 gold at one point. And then that Master Yi, we just had a couple of really stupid team fights, and then we ended up getting smoked by this Master Yi. He just turned a corner right here, you know, around 18 to 20 minutes. With this Katarina really goofed it up. I guess we weren't that far ahead in the early game. I felt like we were, but they kept trading kills in the top lane, and then we just got, you know, really far ahead after that, and then we just didn't close out. But yeah, I mean, look at their team. Right, so we had that Lucian who ended up like 12-2. This Katarina at one point was like 5-1. You know, Warwick was like 5-2. Even GP was like 3-3 in the top lane. And then I was like, you know, like I said, like 1-1-12 or something like that. Veigar's 0-7. This Karthus until the end of the game was like 0-5. Master Yi ended up with like 20 kills. Taric is 0-8. This Zoe was like 0-3. I mean, it was literally like just the Master Yi show. He took over the entire game by himself. Now, yes, that was kind of a special circumstance where they were doing this kind of duo boosting strat, where they had Yi in the top lane, but that just goes to show the potential of this champion is just absolutely like mind-boggling. Just how much damage this guy can do and how much utility he has off of those resets. So, He's always a threat. Now, he can get bullied out and beaten up early, so if you have a master, or if you have something like a Camille or a Kha'Zix or a Elise or something, a Zen, just really anything, can just run into his jungle and just crush him early game before he's 6 especially. So he has pretty good clear time. Like, he's pretty good against large monsters and spread out monsters. His ganking is pretty terrible, especially if he doesn't have red buff early on, but he scales like a monster. He's one of the highest scaling champs in the game. And his reliability is kind of average. Like, he is just kind of a right-click champion, but the skill really comes in with Alpha Strike. You can use that Alpha Strike to dodge a lot of the enemy skill shots. So that is something that can be potentially pretty useful for him. So he's okay. I mean, you're never going to see him in Challenger probably. He was played as kind of like a funnel comp champ in the mid-season to some extent, but it's very rare just because a lot of crowd control can typically shut him down, particularly if he's not paired with Taric. So, you know, he can be dealt with, and he can get invaded and beaten up early, so there are solutions to him. But by and large, I think if you want to one-trick someone and get really good and just snowball out of control, then I think that Master Yi can be extremely strong for that. So you just want to go Conqueror, Triumph, Alacrity, Coup de Grace, Sudden Impact, Ravenous Hunter, and then just Berserker Greaves, Blood Razor, Ginsu's, and Blatherin King. Once you get these 2 items, I think you can solo Baron off of that. You might need the Blatherin King or at least a Bilgewater. But overall, it's still going to be very, very strong. The changes to Ginsu's, I think, actually favor him because it makes the item cheaper. You don't get the extra scaling off of AD anymore, so you lose that aspect of it. But really, he doesn't get a lot of AD. This is all attack speed, and this has very limited AD on it as well. It's mostly attack speed. And that's going to give you some extra armor penetration for the Blood Razor procs, and magic penetration for the Blood Razor proc, and for the Blatherin King proc. So, and it most importantly, it makes the item, I think it was like 200 gold cheaper or something like that. So, yeah, I think he's still a very strong champion, although he's very vulnerable. He can potentially be pretty good if he's left alone to do his thing. Okay, and then tier 3, these champions can be pretty good, but you want to be careful like when you're selecting them. The main reason to play Elise or Evelynn, I think, is if you need AP on your team. So if the rest of your team is AD and you just need some kind of AP threat, I think they're both decent choices. Elise is starting to get a little bit more play in the pro scene, particularly because she's an AP threat. I think they did buff her fairly recently as well. I think they lowered the cooldown on her E. They may have given her spiders a bit more damage. But if you look at kind of the pro builds here, becoming a little bit more popular. Still not like insanely strong, but very good with Electrocute. Pretty good duelist with your spiders early on, especially if you hit your webbing on somebody, you're going to do a ton of damage. Pretty good at diving towers because you can repel to get rid of tower aggro. So I think that she can still get beaten up. It depends on who gets the jump on whom. But she can still get beaten up by things like Kha'Zix, by things like Lee. Although she has some resistance to both of them, right? So if you have your spiders near you, Kha'Zix is not going to be able to get that isolation damage as easily. And then you can use, if you position correctly, you can use her spiders to block Lee Sin Qs. So if you just turn around and like run the other way when Lee's about to Q you, it'll put the spiders behind you. There's a really good chance they'll that you can block it. He may not even notice. He might think he hit you and he hit the spiders and he tries to go in and then you just blow him up. So I think that she has lots of utility. She has a very nice farm because the spiders can tank for her, so she's really healthy usually as she farms. I can go ahead and bump her clearing up to 5 because I think she does it quickly and at a healthy rate. Pretty good at dueling. Her ganks are fantastic early on. Maybe not quite as good as something like Lee's, but she can use her repel to get closer to people, and if she hits that webbing, then they're going to die. Like I said, you can also tower dive with her from a very early level. You know, soak a couple of shots and use your repel to get out. So I think she's good. Her scaling is somewhat suspect. She can still one-shot people as the game goes on, but it gets very risky to do so. If you go in, you're probably going to die. To do that later on, she can't split push. Her objective taking is pretty good because her spiders can tank things like Dragon. Although I think Baron, with all of his AoE, might clear out your spiders a lot faster. I'm not entirely sure about that, but I think she has a ton of potential right now. So you just want to go Electrocute, Cheap Shot, Eyeball Collection, Relentless Hunter, then Absolute Focus, Water Walking. Get your Sorcerer boots. Some people go mobilities, but Sorcerer gives you so much extra damage. You're already really fast with your Spider form. And then just Runic Echoes, Morellonomicon, and Zhonya's. So I think she's a pretty good AP option. And later on, she does have the utility of the webbing. So if you go in yourself, you might die. But hitting somebody with a 1.5 second stun can be very, very powerful if you're trying to siege towers or if you're trying to gank somebody out of a bush. So she does have that sort of team utility. Evelynn is another one. She's a very feast or famine champion, so she's kind of like Master Yi in the sense that she's pretty terrible early on. If you get invaded, you're going to get blown up, you know, by things like Kha'Zix, Lee, Camille, really anything that's are those top tier junglers. So people can invade and blast her early, but once she gets to level 6, she can completely take over, you know, rolling up on people invisible, especially if you hit those charms. Very, very strong. And with her damage, she just scales insanely high. We've faced an Elise, I think, in the last game of the night that we played, and she could pretty much run up to me. She missed her charm both times. Just eat onto me, QQ ult, like blew me up. It was like 1,500 damage on me, and then gets away, like right in front of 2 of my allies. Like nobody can kill her or stop her when she ran up, even though she missed the charm. So she's very, very strong, good at assassinating people later on. She doesn't have much else in the way of utility. She can't really split push that well. Her Baron and Dragon taking potential is pretty low because she's kind of squishy, and she doesn't have anything extra to help her. She doesn't have a lot of, you know, persistent percentage damage on people. So she's okay. She does have this to help keep her healthy in the jungle while she's clearing her passive, but she can just get invaded and killed. So if you can survive to level 6, if you think they're going to let you do that, and if you think you're going to be able to get some kills in lanes, so if they don't have a lot of mobility in their lanes, then maybe you can pull her off. If you're very good on her, you can definitely make her work if you know how to track the pathing of the enemy jungle and avoid it and then play around your specific power spikes. I think that she can work. But she's just a little bit of a riskier pick than some of the other picks on the list. So that's why I have her down at tier 3. Although she is a pretty good, like I said, AP choice. Hey, thanks, Ayub. I appreciate the sub. Okay. Rengar is another one where if you're a one-trick, you definitely can make Rengar work. Like, just like Evelynn, just like Yi. I think he's going to be pretty weak early on. If you get ahead, though, you do have pretty good mobility in the jungle, right? So you can jump and chase people down and kill them. If you're really good at sequencing your spells, resetting your auto attacks with your Q, knowing when to empower your different abilities, like your Q versus using your Roar to heal and to gain that extra resistances, I think. He can be pretty strong. I think that Kha'Zix is just a stronger version of him right now, but Rengar can be good if you get ahead, and particularly like Evelynn, if you get to level 6, that invisibility can get you back in the game. So even if you fall behind a little bit, you can get back with a couple of good picks, and people will let you do that. You know, you'll find the 80 carry off split pushing by himself in the mid game, or you'll find the top laner, you know, off split pushing by herself. So you'll find some opportunities with Rengar if you're a good player. And he does have pretty good ganks early on. His ganks are a little bit better than something like Evelynn's, and definitely better than Master Yi's, because if you can lane gank, if you can get your support to drop a control ward in the lane bush and then come out of the bush on people, you can definitely get some really good kills. So I think he has a lot of potential. Nocturne is another one who was really hot for a while, and people are still playing him some. Obviously, his ultimate is going to be the main show here, so you'll notice that's a very common theme with a lot of these champions down in tier 3, is that, you know, they can get bullied out early, but then if they get to their ultimate, then they're very, very strong. So, like, Nocturne's an example of this, Rengar with his ultimate, Evelynn with her ultimate, you know, Yi with his ultimate. A lot of these are very ult-dependent champions, and Nocturne is no different. So one of the main things about him, though, is not only do you get an ultimate where you can gap close and potentially assassinate the backline, but it also gives you the utility of having the darkness on the map, which can really mess a lot of people up. They're not sure if you're going for them. They have to play defensively. In a team fight, people don't know who to aim for. There's a lot of chaos. So I think that his ultimate has a lot of potential to it. And he actually puts out pretty high sustained damage. You know, if you don't blow him up fast, he will definitely beat you. If he gets that fear off, then he's going to be able to kill you, especially with lethal tempo. So he gets a ton of extra AD off of his Dustbringer. So he gets up to 60 extra AD if he's fighting on his Dusk Trail. And he gets a lot of extra movement speed. And that movement speed, I believe, is doubled if he gets the fear off. Okay, so they're slowed by 90%. Okay, he's ghost hitting against this movement. I thought he got a lot of extra bonus. Hey, thanks, Shaco, for the sub. I appreciate it. Oh, he gains 335 bonus movement speed when he's moving towards targets. Okay, so yeah, he's just basically like impossible to run away from if people are scared. If you have a Fiddlesticks or something else that can fear, it would also give this effect. And it's a really long duration. You know, it's up to 2.25 seconds. His Paranoia is on a fairly long cooldown, but with this build of him where you get Ultimate Hunter and Presence of Mind, you can get that lowered, kind of like Karthus. And if you get a decent chunk of CDR, you know, if you get a Warrior and then eventually like a Dustblade or Edge of Night or Black Cleaver, you know, you can get to like 30% CDR pretty quickly in a game, or at least 20% quickly, and then you can build up to 30 to 40. And, you know, you can get that ultimate down to about 1 minute or so. It's very strong. So he has excellent clear speed. He sustains himself with his passive. If he hits a bunch of people with the Dustbringer, it does nice sort of AoE damage if you line them up correctly. And then, of course, you get that extra bonus AD. And then this, like I said, heals you. Basic attacks, recharge this. So you just want to stack a lot of attack speed on him. You want to get Lethal Tempo, Presence of Mind, Alacrity, Coup de Grace, Sudden Impact, Ulti Hunter. Now, I think that Warrior's probably the best. That gives you more all-in potential. That's what it seems like most people are building on him. I have seen people do Blood Razor on him. I think for the most part, it's going to be Warrior, though. And then Cleaver's really good for shredding tanks, but if you're against squishies, then going something like Dustblade, Edge of Night is good. Now, Edge of Night is great because you can come in with your Edge. That'll block one spell that comes at you, and then you can put on your W shield, and that's going to block another spell that comes at you. And I think if they trigger your W shield, you get extra attack speed, right? Yeah, you get a good chunk of extra attack speed. Oh, it goes up to 80% extra attack speed, so he does a lot of burst damage, and if you can keep him up in a fight, he can do some pretty good sustained damage against other targets as well. So overall, I think Nocturne is a pretty solid pick. He might deserve to be tier 2. Like, I could see a world where Nocturne is like Nocturne and Kayn trade places. I mean, maybe that's how it should be. I just feel like Kayn does have like a lot of sustain and just a lot of kind of tanky disruption factor when you get to Red Kayn at some point. So anyways, the last one that I'll mention here is Twitch. Now, next patch, we might see some of the tanks coming back, particularly Sejuani, so stay tuned for that. I think they're kind of in the penalty box, except for Rammus right now. But Twitch is someone that I want to mention. He's kind of in the vein of, you know, like a Master Yi type of champion where he's very vulnerable, but if you get ahead on him, then you can potentially just completely take over the game. He's extremely risky, though. I know there's a guy who's, I think, a diamond level player in the past. He's been a master level player in North America. He may have gotten master or challenger on like Latin North or something like that. Called King Sticks, and he talks about Twitch jungle a lot. So, you know, watch him if you want to know more of a guide or more specifics about how to Twitch jungle. But basically what it comes down to is you need to get your red buff, and then you have to get a kill at level 2. So you have to gank a lane, either mid or bot lane. You show up invisible with your Q, you have your Contaminate, and you have to get that kill. So basically, if you roll up behind them, they're dead, pretty much at level 2. If they don't respect this, in most situations, they're dead. Because you just start auto-attacking, you're going to be stacking up your poison early on, you're going to be stacking up red buff, and if you get like 5 auto-attacks on them, they're going to be slowed. If you get 5 auto-attacks and then use Contaminate, then you're probably going to kill them. So, you know, I think, and they can flash away, but you can flash after them too. So you absolutely have to get that kill at level 2, like 100%. If you fail that gank, you're going to lose as Twitch, because if he's behind, he is an absolute hot pile of garbage. He has a really hard time clearing camps, particularly if red buff isn't up. You know, there's just no way he's doing raptors or golems early, I don't think. He can do some of the bigger buffs like red and blue, but you have to be proactive. You have to be aggressive. Just constantly run around, spam your invisibility, and, you know, anytime red buff is up specifically, just you have to get those ganks, and just over and over and over again. Lane gank, lane gank, lane gank. And you want to make sure the enemy jungler is not going to be in the area, so you need to have pretty good vision, because everybody's going to beat him up. If Xin Zhao invades him, or if Kha'Zix invades him or whatever, then it's going to be a hard time. Now, if they do something like ward your area, and then they have something like a Xin Zhao on their team, and they shadow you, so they just watch where you're going to go, and then they show up there, it's going to be really bad if they counter gank you. So he's an extremely risky pick, but you have to snowball early. So it's kind of like the opposite of lane Twitch. You're a very, very good early game bully with red buff at level 2, just because you can abuse that invisibility and get really good positioning for your ganks. But if you don't get that, you're going to fall off really hard. So if you get ahead early, if you get a couple of kills, you get that early Blood Razor, early Hurricane, you can snowball really hard, because you can roam the whole map, and people just aren't going to have enough wards to deal with you. So if you're good at that, if you're confident that you're going to be able to... let me look up King Sticks here real quick. I don't know if he still plays a lot in North America. We can see. Or if that's his name. Yeah, right now he's Platinum 2. I mean, he does a lot of, like, stomping lower elos. He doesn't play at Masters, I don't think, as much. He just likes to play on Smurfs and just stomp people in Gold and Platinum. At least that's how I've seen it a lot. But he does get a pretty high win rate with that champion as he goes through. But yeah, so I don't recommend that for everybody, but kind of in the vein of Master Yi, if you're just looking to sort of one trick and just completely take over a game by yourself, I would go Twitch. I just think that Twitch is a bit riskier than Master Yi, because Master Yi can at least farm the camps early on. You know, he can just power farm his jungle, so he doesn't absolutely have to land an insane gank early. So it's like Twitch is a much more aggressive version of Master Yi. If you get the ganks, you're great. If you don't, you completely fail. Whereas Master Yi can still default to power farming and taking objectives later on. Twitch also doesn't do nearly as well, obviously, soloing Baron, taking dragons, split pushing, stuff like that. He's going to be a bit more vulnerable. But if you get ahead, you know, it's just like lane Twitch. You can completely take over. So he does get some slightly different items. He gets Blood Razor, Hurricane, Infinity Edge. You skip the Blade Runner and King, so you just don't have time for it. You want to get the Hurricane early because it'll help you out with your wave clear. Hurricane also triggers Blood Razor stacks, so it does even more percentage-based damage. And then you already have the critical strike off of Hurricane, so Infinity Edge is just going to scale a lot better at that point than Blade is. You can get Blade as your 4th item, but by and large, the game's probably going to be over if you get to these items. So, anyways, that's going to be it. Thank you very much for watching. Hopefully everyone enjoyed this. Be sure to like and subscribe if you enjoy the content. And check out the other tier list videos. Come by, check out the stream sometime. Usually starts around 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time.